I'll speak candidly. I have a master's degree from one of the most elite screenwriting institutions in the world. And I showed up at elementary thinking I was the shit and learned in about 10 hours that I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. Like I had zero idea of how to write television. And I was coming out of one of the most elite schools in the world, and thank God that like I knew enough at least to like keep my mouth shut and just learn from people around me.
Hey folks, Brian Smith here with DreamPath Podcast, where we get inside the heads of talented creatives from all over the world. Today we talk to Jeffrey Paul King. Jeff is the creator and showrunner of a CW network series called Republic of Sarah. Republic of Sarah is about a rebellious and passionate high school teacher who becomes the leader of a town that declares independence from the rest of the country. It's a very unique concept, and there's a lot of diversity in this cast and a lot of heart and a lot of humor. I watched the first few episodes, and it's great. You can see it every Monday, commercial-free on the CW network, and you can also see it streaming for free the next day. Mr. King, before creating Republic of Sarah, you may know him from being the producer and writer for 7 full seasons on Elementary, starring Johnny Lee Miller and Lucy Liu and Aidan Quinn. So Jeffrey King is just an immensely talented guy, super hardworking, and he has a lot of wisdom to share about the industry, how he rose from the ranks of intern to writer to producer and then to showrunner. And he tells us how it all works and how hard you have to work to get where he's at, how to become successful, and how the industry has changed and how it hasn't changed over the last 10 years. So if you enjoy hearing the stories of filmmakers and television folks who have inside knowledge of how it all runs and how to break into that business, this is a great interview for you. I really enjoyed hearing about his journey into the arts, and I think you will too. So without further ado, let's jump into my chat with Jeffrey Paul King. Jeffrey Paul King, welcome to DreamPath Podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I got a chance to watch the first 3 episodes of Republic of Sarah, and I didn't finish off the all of the screeners that that CW sent me, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to tell my listeners the origin story of this show. I mean, it's a very original concept and very well executed from what I can see, but I don't know what went on behind the scenes to bring this all together. How many years it took to bring to fruition?
Yeah. So I suppose it all starts with a CBS show called Elementary. I graduated from UCLA. I have a master's degree in showrunning. I happened to attend that very prestigious university in this weird kind of 7-year window where they had a whole focus in showrunning. You can literally major in showrunning. And so out of there, I got very thankfully, after stocking shelves at Trader Joe's for a few months, I got hired on the first season of CBS's Elementary. And I did 7 years on that show. I worked the entire run of that series. I was on that show and I just learned a ton, and it was a bunch of really heavy hitting, awesome procedural writers and who really taught me how to be a TV writer, over the course of 154 episodes. So what happened is as that show wrapped up, CBS Studios called me and said, hey, you're a part of the family now. And we love the work you've done for us at Elementary. And, you have any ideas of your own? And what are you thinking? So I went in for a meeting and pitched them a couple of things that were maybe more kind of down the middle and things I thought they would like, and nothing really kind of caught fire. And then literally, this is one of those true Hollywood stories. Like on the way out of the office, I sort of said, oh yeah, and I have this thing about this country, this town that becomes a country. And the executives were like, wait a minute, like come back inside and tell us about that. The idea itself comes from the fact that I'm just obsessed with maps. My undergraduate degree is in cultural geography and cartography. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I am a published map maker. It's a weird fun fact, but in college, I went to Middlebury College in Vermont, and Middlebury is one of the few places left, one of the few institutions where they have a dedicated geography department. You can major in geography. Mm-hmm. And so I published a map my senior year at that school where I made a map of Boston's historic theater district and got put into a textbook. So I've just always loved that. And the idea of how do you start a country was always really fascinating, especially since I'd studied and read about a lot of places in college where this, not exactly this, but some weird kind of versions of this story of the show has happened, maybe most famously, like there's a strip of land in Italy called Siborga. And the basic headline is, after the Napoleonic Wars, they're making this list of what Italy is going to be. And they put all these different pieces of land on it, and they leave Siborga off that list because at some point, like in the early 11th century, the Pope had been like, this land belongs to God and you can't have it, or something like that. So anyway, cut to 1966, I think, and there's this guy who figured out that Siborga was never properly claimed by Italy and declared it independent. And to this day, right now in 2021, it exists inside Italy as an independent principality. So it's not exactly sovereign, but it's like somewhat real that it has some level of independence. So all that stuff combined, like for me was where the idea came from. And then obviously you need to populate that premise with awesome characters. And I think on that front, I grew up in New Hampshire. I grew up as a bit of a punk rock kid. I was the only person in my boarding school with, Rancid posters on his wall. And I just always, the glossy 6-inch heel, perfect looking people never really appealed to me. I was sort of like the kind of blue collar rough and tumble types. And so I think it was just about populating the show with people who have that kind of, anarchist spirit, a little bit subversive, a little bit kind of wary of things like giant mining companies. So
Yeah.
that's the sort of how the show came to be. The idea came to be. Quickly, the show itself was, CBS got involved, the studio helped me develop it. I worked with two amazing production companies, one called Black Lamb, which is Mark Webb's shingle, Mark Webb of 500 Days of Summer and The Amazing Spider-Man. And then the other one is Fullwell 73, which is kind of James Corden's group. And then we all worked together to build this great thing. And then the CBS, the network, bought it as an idea and oversaw the pilot and stuff. And that was in I think 2019. And it was great. We made a great pilot. It was different than the one that's on the air now. It had Sarah Drew in it from Grey's Anatomy and a bunch of other really amazing actors. And Mark Webb directed it. And, I think it was a good pilot. Ultimately, the network, CBS, the network, passed on it. And so, usually that means your show is dead. But then kind of lo and behold, like 3 months later or 2 months later, the CW called me and said, hey, we saw your pilot. The studio sent it to us and we love it. And, can we bring you in and talk to you about how it might live on our network? And that's where sort of the whole thing started, I suppose. I'll stop rambling now. That's a long answer.
That's a great lead up to how this came together. So the origin story starts with really a very organic understanding of the fact that there are these sovereign entities that are out there, and they're fascinating because you are a cartographer, you're a geographer, and that's your background. So it's not like you are sitting in a writer's room and you're like, oh, what is like a really catchy, gimmicky way to start a show. This came about very organically from something that you were extremely interested in.
Yeah, 100%. And I will say, like, the catchy, gimmicky ideas I had as a young co-executive producer level writer, like those are the ones that didn't work in that meeting I was talking about, where I would pitch the studio these ideas and it was like, yeah, this cop show that had this angle or whatever. It was only when I sort of leaned into what I was passionate about that I think probably I came alive just as much as the idea did. So yeah, that's, I think that really helped sell it. And I think the other thing that's true is like, and this is something that speaks to maybe my larger perspective on creativity itself, which is just like, I think you also I just know my stuff in that area. Like I'm a big research nerd. Like it's like I if I like something, I want to know about it. I want to get involved with it. I want to study it. So with the Republic of Sarah, like, yeah, man, my life is steeped in geography and cartography and how, the way in which place affects people and the anthropology of movement and things like that. So I think it's just like taking that passion seriously and learning a lot about it then became kind of grist for the mill of the show. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you find that in the entertainment industry that the folks that do succeed and advance in terms of their career, that it's because of ideas that are organic and really steeped in, a passion for a certain subject matter versus that sort of, hey, it's a cop show, except the cops are, angels from heaven or whatever whatever the crazy gimmicky idea is.
That is a great idea, Brian. Yeah. You should be pitching that idea tomorrow. Yeah. Cops are angels from heaven. I love it.
Heaven's Gate. I don't know. That dates me a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, honestly, I think the answer to that question depends on how you're defining succeed and success. So what I mean by that is just like, we all know, success comes in many forms. And I think especially as a creative person, you need to define like, what does it mean to you? Like, what kind of success do you want? And if that success is, I want to be rich, okay, that's fine. Like, there's no one way is better than any other. If your journey, if your success is, wealth and world domination, I think you can find success with, cop show, like cop shows. I say cop shows not disparagingly. I came from one. I learned about one for 7 years, but like, stuff that's more down the middle, maybe stuff that's more like IP reboots, redos, sequels, stuff
Right.
like that. Like, and that stuff makes money. It's like, and this is mass media. Let's be real. It's a capitalist enterprise, and that stuff is great. It entertains people. It makes money. It does what it's supposed to do. So if that's your definition of success, and it can be for plenty of people who want to have families and send their kids to colleges and all that kind of stuff, like that's great. I think for me, there's that other definition of succeed and success, which maybe is like creative fulfillment. Like I feel like I'm making something I'm proud of, or that I would watch, or that I like. And I think on that front, then I would agree with you wholeheartedly, which is like, I think it only comes from indulging in something that you're really excited about, that you believe in, that you care about. And I think that's the stuff that I like to watch. One of my dearest friends, who's also a UCLA alum, is Stephen Canals, who made Pose for FX. That show just pops off the screen because that's a world, and showing trans people of color and their stories is something that Stephen would die for, bleeds for, and you can feel that when you watch the show. So I think for me, like that's where I want to live in my own work. And I think for me, yeah, like you have to have some passion for it to really pop, I think.
Yeah. When you were creating the show and you're pitching the ideas and you're talking to CBS and they buy it and then it goes to CW, were you thinking in terms of the constraints that those networks would have on the production? For example, this is this is all shot on a set, or at least it appears to be kind of it has like a Gilmore Girls vibe to it in terms of like there's a it's a downtown, there's a diner, and there's these very familiar, comforting, frankly, set pieces. And I don't know if that's just the network that creates that, or if that is you as the creator and the showrunner, saying, all right, this is what we need to have these constraints to make it easier to tell this story on a weekly basis, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's a question that makes sense or
It
not.
makes it makes a ton of sense. Yeah, it's a great question, because I think the answer is probably it's a little bit of both, but probably more of it comes from me. Just in terms of it, I'm not trying to say it comes from me because I'm the greatest. No, it's just like I think when you're working in network television, I think and this is probably true of any artistic endeavor, which is like I think it is important to like know your constraints, know which masters you serve. So I'm working for CBS and the CW. That's a network broadcast. It's a network channel. So I know I've got to have act outs. I know that I'm going to have a budget of a certain amount, and that budget is a way easier to use if you have sets, if you have places you can come back to and use. It's obviously a lot cheaper and more efficient to shoot on sets than it is out in the world. So certainly we shoot exteriors and we shoot on location sometimes, but yeah, having sets is like crucial to the budget of the show. So for me though, because I come from theater, my first kind of writing forays were theatrical, and I was at the Fringe Festival when I was 20 with my first play in Scotland, to the Fringe Festival. And the Fringe Festival is the kind of place where it's like, okay, you've got 16 square feet, a table, and one chair, and you're like, okay, I'll make something out of that. Great. Like I'll do something with that. So I always I'm a big believer in like constraint is the mother of all creativity. So for me, it's like, okay, I know I've got to have a couple of locations that are on sets. I know that this is the way the CW operates. This is the way that shows like this operate. Like
Mm-hmm.
let's lean into that and let's
Yeah.
embrace it. And the question, of course, becomes then like, well, can I make those constraints my own? Can I make my version of those things really special? I sort of often joke with people like, if you want complete creative freedom, go make indie films. Like this is not the place for that. Like
Right.
the joy of network is you get to make it, and they're gonna. It's the trade off is like it's on the air and there's 13 episodes, and you get to work with a team of people who really collaborate with you. So for me, it's like you talk about the diner, for example. Like it's a great example. Sweetie Pie is what it's called in our show. Like one of the best pieces of advice I ever got from one of the writers in Elementary was like, if you're ever gonna make your own show, make sure there's a place where a bunch of people can hang out and talk. Like it's just a set you'll use all the time. So it was like, all
Right.
right, well, let's do a diner. And then in the diner, like one of the things I'm really proud of, I think is cool, is like that question I was saying of like, can I make it my own? Can I make it cool? Can I make it a special version? And so like, if you look at our show, if you watch our show, the set decoration of that diner, the diner is covered in photos of what look like old heirloom family photos and pictures, school portraits and stuff from all over the years. Here's a cool factoid. It's like what we did before we built that diner is we sent an email to our cast, to our writers, to our everybody in the production and said, if you want, send in your own family photos, and we're going to take the time to clear them all and put them in the walls of Sweetie Pie.
Oh,
And
very
so we
cool.
actually did all the paperwork. Yeah. So like for us, that diner, those photos on the wall, those are photos of like my parents, our actors' parents, the Grips' parents, like people's dogs. And what that does for us is it means that when our actors come to work, when our crew comes to work, they feel like they're in a place that feels like home,
Hmm.
feels like that diner should feel. So I just look at it as like, yes, they're constraints, but constraint is maybe not even the right word. I think they're like opportunities, like
Hmm.
it's just like a chance to like, all right, well, how can you get over this hurdle creatively?
Right. Yeah. And I think there's a certain benefit to having that familiarity every single episode. And there's a reason why folks watch Gilmore Girls, Veronica Mars, and those types of shows like over and over and over again. Like my wife will watch, a series 7 times, 8 times. She'll just go back to it. Same thing with my kids, and I do the same thing with certain shows. But the familiarity that you have, it's like, okay, you can always count on it in a show. That's always going to be there. It's always going to be where characters can go, as you say, like in the diner, to talk, to come up with ideas, to process, problems and drama. And it's kind of a brilliant, it's just a brilliant design of a show to have that familiarity of the set, and to also, as you say, personalize the set so that everybody feels connected to it. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, and it's some of our actors who talked about too, like about how like they'll be doing some dramatic scene in there, and they'll look over the shoulder of their co-star and see a photo of their parents from when they were in the '60s. It's like, and it's just how that informs them. I think the other thing is like, just to your point, that kind of familiarity, like not only is it comforting on screen, but I think that's also just true to life. Like my own life in Los Angeles here, like my wife and I go to the same 5 restaurants all the time. Of course we
Right.
do. Like you everybody carves out a life for themselves that actually has a lot of repetition in it. So like
Mm-hmm.
putting that on screen also feels not only comforting but real, true,
Mm-hmm.
but true.
Well, how did you approach the first episode? And I did not see the pilot for CBS, but I did see obviously the first episode of this CW season, and it went very quickly. Like things just boom, 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 and I got the impression that was probably a network constraint where they're like, all right, Jeff, this is your shot. You got to, set this thing up so the audience knows exactly what's happening. It's all making sense and it's coming together in the course of 42 minutes. What was your approach to like balancing, not moving too fast and trying to cram too much exposition maybe into the first episode versus, listening to the network folks and carrying out their orders?
Yeah, it's the writing pilots is incredibly difficult. But I sort of love it. I don't know. I mean, and I think that, to answer your question, like I think the way to think about a pilot is like what's difficult about a pilot is, to use a very ham-fisted analogy, it's like a pilot is like both the fuse and the dynamite, right? Every other episode can just be the dynamite, can just be like, boom, wow, exciting. The problem with the pilot is it has to be the fuse and the dynamite. So like, I think the first thing that is important to do is when you talk about like the fuse part of the pilot, that's the part where you're like setting up what the show is. Like, what is this show about? Who are the people in the show? And what are you expecting to see every week? On that front, I think answering that question is really important. You have to take time to figure out like, what is my show and where does it live? And a good example of that for us is like, in the course of the first episode, they go from this idea of declaring independence to basically doing it, which of course is insane, right? It's really fast. It's very crazy. But I think part of that is because we knew that like where our show lives is in the creating of the country, not in the fighting to become the country, right? You could have done an entire season on like the legal like wrangling that comes from creating a new country, right? Like look at the
Right.
history of any real country. What is South Sudan is the most recent country that's been on the earth.
Yeah.
It takes years to do that. So like for us, it's just a matter of sitting down and being like, look, what our show is not a hard-hitting legal drama that like intellectualizes how you create a new country. That's not the show. The show is the fun of what happens if you are a new country and you have to make a country from scratch. So it's like, how quickly can we get to that point as quickly and logically as possible? So that's the first thing. The second thing, when I say like the fuse and the dynamite, is the pilot, however, cannot just be set up. It has to also be interesting and fun in its own right. It has to have its own explosion, its own, oh my God. And so that's where like, then you have to figure out, okay, here's the setup, and here's knowing what my show is going to be 5, 6, 7 episodes from now. But then inside the story, also, can we also make it, an A story, B story, C story that has a beginning and a middle and an end? So it's like, it becomes about, and spoilers if you haven't seen the pilot, but like, there's a blackmail plot where somebody tries to blackmail Sarah, and that has sort of a beginning and a middle and an end as far as like the resolution of Sarah versus the mining company. And that's interesting. It's got character moves and whatever. There's a really great sort of teenage love plot about one of Sarah's students that has a beginning and a middle and end and is great and has twists and turns and awesome scenes. So it's just about doing two things at once in a pilot. And that's what's difficult. But again, I think it really ultimately the headline is like, you just have to know what you are. Like, what kind of show are you? What are you trying to make? And lean into that. You can't be all things at once. So if you look at like some of the reviews of our pilot, yeah, they were just like, this is ridiculous. It goes so quickly. This will take forever. And it's like, I agree with you, but our show is not, we're not going to do 20 episodes on a West Wing version of a courtroom scene where we're fighting for independence. That's not what the show is.
Right.
So we have to just get to what, you know what I mean? So that's
Right.
It's just about knowing that and embracing it and being confident in it.
Well, this may sound like a crazy analogy, but I kind of look at Republic of Sarah almost like in the setup, almost like Walking Dead, because Walking Dead doesn't have a huge setup. You just have to like accept what is happening pretty quickly. Like there's zombies, there's been an apocalypse of some kind. And then very quickly into the series, just a couple of episodes in, you realize this is not about zombies. Like, yes, there are zombies there, but it's about the relationships. And I noticed that with Republic of Sarah, it's not really about secession. It's not political. It's not a statement. It's not like a statement against America or American, colonialism or, it's just about relationships. And so it's a nice backdrop, and it's really fascinating to have, but you really very quickly just start paying attention to what's happening in terms of, Grover and Sarah and Danny and Sarah's mom. And it becomes, something more special for sure.
Yeah, it's fun. I think it's a great analogy. Like there actually is something weirdly, the show actually sort of shares a lot of DNA with like sci-fi, traditional sci-fi, which is just like, take this giant conceit, this world building idea, and then let's let some characters live inside it. We could call our show poly sci-fi, where it's just like, yeah, it's like, sorry to tell you, like the Matrix is not about the Matrix. The Matrix is about one man's journey to realizing who he should and ultimately will become. And that's true of any good sci-fi. And same with, to your point, The Walking Dead. So Republic of Sarah, it's not about like the legal language of how you build a country. It's about what happens to people inside of that premise. So yeah, it's an analogy that works, I think, really well.
So tell me where theater fits in with, your undergraduate degrees in cartography and cultural geography, and then UCLA. Where does theater fit in with that?
So when I was a kid, I used to walk around the house singing. I just, as a lot of kids do, but my mom is an accountant, and she's very industrious, and she's the kind of person who's like, you like singing? Let's put you in a chorus. Like, let's do it. And you're like, okay. So when I was 7 years old, I tried out for and got into a children's chorus in Massachusetts called the Treble Chorus of New England. And sort of only after I was in it did I discover that it was actually sort of an elite thing. It was quite a talented group. And so ultimately what that resulted in is I sang opera professionally for a couple of years when I was a kid.
Wow.
Because I was in this chorus, and at one point the Boston New York Opera Company called up and said, hey, Carmen, actually, no, sorry, it was La Boheme. La Boheme famously has a part for a children's chorus. And they said, send us your 7 best kids to be in this opera. And I got sent to that. And then they needed a boy to be, the ghost of Charles II to E. Puritani. And like, long story short, I ended up doing 6 operas with the Boston New York Opera Company. Sometimes I was a supernumerary. Sometimes in Tosca, I sang the part of the shepherd at the top of the 3rd act, which is like got me into the opera union. And it was like, it was a paid singing soloist part.
Opera union. I didn't know that existed.
Yeah. And so I spent my like formative years, like my elementary and middle school years, like in tights and wigs singing opera, like professionally.
That's awesome.
I was still going to school, but like, yeah. And so I just got really excited. I fell in love with theater early. And so I started to, I went to boarding school, as I mentioned. And like, I think because my parents are my mom's an accountant, as I mentioned, my father was an engineer. My father got sick when I was 11. He had a bunch of strokes at once. and lives now, got moved to a nursing home basically, and still lives there to this day. And the only reason I say that is just because I think it's like the lesson of my mom being an accountant plus the lesson of when my father getting sick taught me was like sort of how frail this whole experiment is. This thing that we call life can be taken from you very quickly.
Right.
And so I liked theater and I liked opera. And so when I got to like high school, I was just like, well, I want to make my own. And I just started writing plays in high school. So that's where the theater thing came from. And like when I got to college, I always liked movies and TV and theater, and I was writing plays. But a lot of a lot of the theater majors were wearing black berets and smoking clove cigarettes. It just was just like it wasn't sort of mentally stimulating enough for
Right.
me. So I went off to the geography department. But yeah, and then the real kind of breakthrough came. Like I said, I had a friend who's British who had been to the Fringe Festival with a piece of his the year before I went, and sort of said to me like, dude, you could do it. It just takes sort of gumption, basically. And so I wrote this play, and we raised $17,000, and I took 6 kids. We were all like high school, college sophomores, like to Scotland for the summer, basically, and performed this
Nice.
play 25 nights in a row. Like with real audiences and real tickets and real crowds. And so our smallest crowd was 4, and our biggest was like 68 or something. This little tiny black box theater, and so that was the hook for me. Like watching people laugh at this kind of Far Side written, like it's like heroin, or what I imagine heroin feels like. It's just like it's so intoxicating. So that's where theater came. I also just liked like the thing I like about theater, and it's often advice I give to the younger writers, which people like, oh, how do I get into the business? My sort of first piece of advice always is like write plays,
Mm-hmm.
because there are 2 things that are special about there's 2 things that make theater really special. One, there are no rules. You can do scenes that are 27 pages long. I can't write a 27 long page scene for the CW. You just can't do it.
Right.
That's one. And 2 is you can put it on. So like when I was still at UCLA, my friends and I rented the Meta Theater on Melrose here in Los Angeles, and we did a night of short plays together, and people came and watched them. And you can do theater. You can just put it on in a garden if you want. So it just really, I love the blue collar nature of theater. It's like, oh, the lights need hanging. Great. I'll get on the ladder and go do it. Oh my God, the tickets need selling. I'll go out and yell for an hour about how we have a show starting soon. Like there's just something about the teamwork of it and the kind of doing all things that I think is very mirrored by being a showrunner. Ultimately, theater is a very good starting place if you were looking to be a showrunner.
Fascinating. So what made you decide to major in get a master's in show running? That's very specific.
Yeah, so I was an assistant at the United Talent Agency, which is one of the biggies out here. Doing the classic like get coffee and get yelled at and answer phones and stuff. And and I went to Sundance a couple of times, and it was great. I learned a ton. But I wanted to write, and I got into UCLA. And when I got there, I was like, oh, I'm going to do movies and whatever. And they had this, it was called the showrunner track back then. And you had to audition. You had to submit a piece of writing sort of to get into it on top of, you had already gotten into UCLA and you sort of do a further audition. And I did that because I thought, well, like I said, I have a CPA for a mom, economical. It's the same amount of money, but I get more for my bang for my buck. I'll do it. Right. Great. So I auditioned for the TV track, got into it. And they call like 10 kids people get taken, and they spend those 10 people take a bunch of classes together. They're just together as a group the whole way through. Like my first day of television class, I was like, oh my God, this is what I want. Like, this is forget movies. Like almost instantly I was like, forget movies, TV is where it's at. There's just so much more fun. You get to grind, you're doing it all the time. You get to do, in the old adage is like in film, directors have the power.
Right.
In TV, the writers do.
So what year are we
cool.
talking about here? What year were you, or years were you going through this program?
I started in the fall of 2009. So It hadn't quite yet been like the streaming revolution, and Netflix still came on DVDs at that point. But so I think maybe I was a little early to the party as far as like, wow, TV is the future. TV is where it's at. But it was certainly happening in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fall of 2009, and the program basically was, the first year was comedy, and the second year was drama, and I loved it. I was really happy there, and UCLA is a pretty serious place. In my little 10-year group were some really heavy hitting people who've gone on, I was working and learning with the likes of like Amy Aniobi, who's an executive producer at Insecure on HBO, and Jason George, who works at Netflix, and Lisa McQuillan, who was on Blackish, like people who've gone on to have successful careers.
Mm-hmm.
You're with some really heavy hitting young writers in that program. So I was like, really, you put through your paces. It's awesome. And you do like faux runner, you get to pretend to run the writer's room, and you get to do all these cool things there. So that's kind of the UCLA experience, and it was great. And because of that too, I ended up being able to intern places because I was a student. So I ended up in the writers' room at Brothers and Sisters for a bit. That Sally Field show that was on for a while, and
Mm-hmm.
from there I went over to Grey's Anatomy. I was an intern at season 7 of Grey's Anatomy, and learned a ton from Krista Vernoff, who's obviously a huge, heavy hitting writer, and she's awesome, and she's a bit of a mentor for me. And so the whole experience for me was really positive, and I really felt like I learned a lot. Like, it was the kind of place where, put it this way, it was the first place I'd gone where I think sometimes arts education can be a little too soft around the edges, where it's like, oh, there's no wrong answer. Art is art. You just make what you want and what you feel. And yes, that's certainly true. But making art for money is a different thing. If you want to work in the studio system, as soon as capitalism enters the equation, that's a whole different thing. And UCLA was really good. There were professors there who you turn a scene in or something, and they'd say like, no, not good enough, like not funny enough. You're missing Joe. And you go, oh nice. Shit, okay, like, and I like that. I was when I was playing sports, I was responding to coaches who were like, just give it to me straight,
Mm-hmm.
So they were just really good about saying, no, this has to be better.
Concrete
has to be tighter, cut a page. Yeah. Yes, exactly. And I was so excited about that. I love that about UCLA.
So the show running major, you're there with like 10 people, pretty elite program, it sounds like. Did you feel like playwriting and putting on plays prepared you in a certain way because of the constraints that you have on a stage, and the constraints that are present in every television production?
I think so. Yeah. I think it was a really great training ground for me. Because of what you're saying about with the constraints. The other thing though, that's true that I like, that I thought that really helped me as far as my experience, like at the Fringe Festival and writing plays, was just like, was the grind of it, if that makes sense, which is like TV. I like this about it, but like, you are constantly running on a set of train tracks and there is a locomotive behind you. That's what TV is, which is like, we need pages tomorrow because we're shooting tomorrow. Like, it's like, oh my God, I get a rush from that. I like that. It means you just keep working. And so theater is similar to that, only just because like there's no ability, if you're putting a play on, like, you just have to roll with the punches in theater. Like, to your point about constraint, like, either the set isn't working or the space is too small to do something you want. So it's like, rewrite this now, like, and you're like, oh my God. And so you're rewriting this thing because the play's going on that night or whatever. Like, there's something very workman about it, which I always liked. So that was, I think it was helpful as a background. Yeah.
Yeah. I've talked to other filmmakers too about television versus film. And there does seem to be a grind that you either, lean into and appreciate, or put up with, depending on your perspective. But the television grind I've heard a lot about is, you obviously have a schedule, and if, it's a weekly deal, and, but also the steadiness of the income too, I would imagine, is pretty attractive to folks in the entertainment industry. It's like, you have, a whole season that you can look forward to, like, oh, we're good for a season, or we're good for 2 more seasons. So do you find that now that television seems to be in like a golden age right now? I mean, everybody is, putting on just amazing shows on so many different networks, so many different streaming platforms, that there's more folks that are gravitating toward television as opposed to film?
I think so. Absolutely. For a bunch of reasons, like one of the things you mentioned is absolutely true, which is, yeah, man, we all have lives outside of the work, and TV is a more sort of consistent lifestyle, which is, yeah, you can depend on a paycheck, and it's kind of a week to week thing, especially if you're on a steady show. I mean, I'm so grateful to have gotten onto Elementary. I mean, that was a very steady job for 7 years. It was like
an
a very
amazing
good
show
job
too.
where, yeah, you had. Exactly. Yeah. People really liked it, and you got to sort of stretch your creative muscles, but also like, yeah, you have your weekends, and you kind of know what to expect, and you can take care of your family if that's what you need to do financially, things like that. So there's that element to it. I think also, like, in this day and age in TV, like, I think TV is really where creativity sort of is flourishing most at this moment, I would say. There's this kind of joke, like, nobody's making movies anymore. It's either you're making a $400 million Marvel movie, or you're making an indie film for $10 on your iPhone, and there's nothing in between.
Yeah. And
so for most people, unless you're doing one of those two things, there's not really anything for you in features anymore. Whereas TV is this awesome, this like utopia of like, what do you want to do? You want to make a show called The End of the Fucking World? The episodes are 11 minutes long? Sure, says Netflix. Like, it's just this, you want to make a really fucking introspective, interesting examination of rape culture, like, especially among people of color, great. I may destroy you. Here it is. It's like, you want to make you want to put a bunch of people in Victorian clothing? Great. Downton Abbey. Like, it's just it really is the place where you can make the thing you, obviously within reason, like, want to make.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think that's what's really pulling people more than like, oh, it's more stable or more money. I think it's just the ability to really kind of indulge in some of the things you want to do.
Yeah.
That's, I think, the joy of it.
Yeah. And I think if you just follow the money too, and you see where Apple and Amazon, and their original content that they're putting on, they're going there for a reason. That's where the eyeballs are. People are paying attention to television. They're just not watching movies as much. And I cover Sundance, and I go there and interview a lot of folks that have films at Sundance. But I feel like it is the challenge has gotten even more insurmountable over time with Sundance, because there's just so many. I don't know how to put it, but it seems like there's so many different places to watch movies and there's not a lot of folks going to theaters anymore. So that that type of filmmaking is more difficult to do in terms of finding financing and folks that are going to be willing to put money into that type of investment.
Yeah, completely. It's such an uphill grind. Um, and by the way, the other thing that's so tricky about it, like especially that kind of filmmaking, is like it's an uphill grind that often you're doing nearly by yourself. Like, whereas TV is a team sport, man, and like I love that about TV. Like, if you're even on the writing side, there's a writer's room. Like certainly I am the captain of the ship, but I'm not the only one on the ship. Thank God for the rest of the people on the ship. Like,
Yeah.
thank God for the other writers. Thank God for the other executive producers who I'm like up late and I'm freaking out about something, and one of my producers will say, dude, let me handle this thing, and what about this? And I mean, it's so awesome to have that support. And certainly people who make indie films, often it's like a group of people doing it together, but there's really like a team element to TV that also I think is just really nice. It's just like, why kill yourself to sort of do the auteur thing all alone in an empty room, when like TV is, yeah, you can just sort of call on your friends and family, as it were, to help you push this ball up the mountain.
Yeah, very collaborative, and everybody has their lane that they stay in, and you know exactly who's doing what. Tell us about your writer's room. What does your writer's room look like in terms of the diversity? The reason I ask that question is I follow a lot of television writers on Twitter, and I hear about the issue of diversity in the writer's room in terms of male versus female, non-binary, trans, ethnic diversity, and how do you approach that as a showrunner?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. It's a timely question, certainly. And I think for me, like, there's all this sort of politicized discussion at the moment about like, oh, okay, who deserves the job and what do they look like and all that kind of stuff. And for me, all that is sort of bullshit. Like, I want a diverse set of writers, not because I want to tick a bunch of boxes and, so I don't get canceled. I want a bunch of diverse writers because it makes the show better, because it's more interesting, because they like people who don't look and think like me are going to see the world and experience the world in a completely different way. And like that makes for better drama, better writing, better discussion. So like, again, this whole thing of like, oh, they're making diversity come to town. Like, fuck that. Like, diversity is better for the product. It's better for everyone's brain, like in terms of in the writer's room. So our writer's room, like, it was majority female. I think we were exactly half in terms of diverse. We were very small. And by the way, like our editors were majority female, our directors are majority female on the show. Like, our cast is majority female. The female thing is big for me. As I mentioned, my father got sick when I was 11, and after he was gone as in the sort of the version of him that was, him. After he was gone, like, there weren't really any adult role models in my life, or there were few and far between. Whereas on the female side, my mom has had this gaggle of kind of amazing, strong women who became this sort of wonderful group of kind of aunties and grandmothers for me. So all my heroes are women, and so the show like is very female driven. And I'm very proud of that. And so the writers room itself, like, yeah, we tried to get as much as we could within the budget, because obviously, you still have a budget to deal with. I mean, building a writer's room is sort of like fielding an NBA team. You could have a couple of rookies and a couple of mid-level people and a couple of all-stars, and you kind of try and balance the budget that way.
Yeah.
And so within the budget, like, yeah, it's about, can I get people who see the world differently than I do? Both because it's better for storytelling, but also because we have characters that aren't straight white men. I'm a straight white male, and I think the best thing I can do as showrunner is to just always be aware of that. Here's who I am. Here's what privilege that affords me. Here's what that means for me in the world. As long as I'm aware of that and I'm honest about it and what that means and the shortcomings it maybe gives me, then you can engage with other people who are different from you and have really honest conversations about how that experience is different than a young Black woman, and that's different than a trans person who defines as Latinx or whatever. So um, our writers room was really spirited. We had great writers. I was really happy to have them all, and a lot of them were able to like really contribute to specific kind of storylines in the show. That was really the joy too, where it was like I'm a person who, again, I think because of this, I always go back to this theater thing where it's like I'd rather figure out what we have and what our constraints are and go from there, as opposed to trying to fit something into a square peg and round hole. So what I mean by that is, okay, I'm not somebody who's going to say like, this is what the show is going to be. These are the arcs that we're doing, and I need writers who can do these arcs. I'd rather find awesome writers and then say to them, what's your life experience like? What have you wrestled with in your life? What do you believe in? What scares you? What stories do you want to tell? Okay, let's do that. Let's go in that direction. And so that's, I think, just how you get stories that are more organic and that are better by kind of maybe subverting your own ego a little bit. Like, yes, it's quote unquote my show. I am quote unquote the showrunner, but like that's not it's not useful if everything is just me making decisions. So we got amazing stuff out of our writers, and by the way, out of our cast too. Like, one of the things that we did right away was the writers were hired, and then in the first week of the writers room, we scheduled one-on-one meetings with every single one of our casts for the writers, just to meet them, to know them, to say hello, and also for the cast to say, like, Russ, to say to the cast, okay, what's your experience like? Are there stories you want to tell? What scares you? What frightens you? What do you think about this character? And really, we got a lot of stuff out of that too. So, specifically, there's a really awesome storyline about Grover, who's a black man in the show. The character is black. Ian Duff, who's a delightful and wonderfully talented actor. Like, really, we had a conversation with him where he was saying, really portraying a sort of compassionate point of view about like mental health in the male Black community is something I care about. I'd like to do that. And we thought, oh my God, great. So we just leaned into it, and that was born. And one of my writers, is also a Black man who had experienced the loss of his wife at a young age, and that was literally just coincidence. But so like between those two guys, it's like, yeah, you know what, like those guys are going to drive that story. Like my job then is to listen to those two people tell me what that was like and experience that, and to let them have the reins on that, so that when we're driving in that direction, it's as truthful as it can be. So I think it's just about like kind of juggling different voices and knowing when to obviously making sure everything that comes out of the writer's room is still sort of the show that we've sold to CW, and it's still a show that's something I'm happy with and I'm proud of, and is in the direction we'd like to be going. But that is sort of honors the different voices that are in the room and the different voices that are on the cast.
Yeah. What kind of advice would you give to a room full of, say, high school seniors who want to get into entertainment, specifically film and television, and maybe just specifically television, since that's what you've done most of, in terms of undergraduate degrees, college versus no college, moving to LA, film school versus no film school, those types of advice tips?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think the first thing I would say, above all else, this is the best piece of advice I can give you, is you have to you got to work your ass off. And I know everyone says like, oh, you got to work hard. Like, no, I mean, like, you need to like work your ass off, because if you're going to try and get into TV, then you're competing with Shonda Rhimes. You're competing with me. You're competing with, and the work it takes is immense. So like, you need to like really focus. I mean, when you get into the Writers Guild, they always give you this big welcome speech of how especially you made the Writers Guild, but they give you this statistic, which is true, which is that there are more people every year who become professional baseball players than there are who become professional TV writers.
Wow.
So like, that's how hard it is, because of course with the minor leagues and everything. So like, that's how hard it is to do. And so I don't say it to scare anybody. I just say it to be like, so that's what you're going up against, So to get there, so if you want to work in TV, watch a shitload of TV, study TV, learn about it, like study format, study form, study. Like you don't go out on a Friday night, stay in and write your pilot. Like I was working at UTA probably 65 hours a week, and I would get home at 8:30 at night and I would write till 11. Like, that's not an exaggeration. And it's not me tooting my own horn. I just knew that like, shit, man, if I'm going to try and work in this thing, it's hard. Like it's, that's the first thing. I think the second thing is just like, you need to know what you want to do, and you need to know yourself. And so what I mean by that is this, like the question of film school or not film school, or degree or not degree, like for me, knowing yourself is just about like, are you the kind of person who loves school and school is good for you and provides you with something? If so, then go to film school. Like, I was always good at school. I liked school. I learned a lot from school. I'm somebody who like was into a teachers and I could sit there and I was into it. I have friends who weren't and aren't and didn't go to school and they're doing just as well, you know? So it's about knowing yourself and knowing what you need to thrive, you know, like, oh, are you a
Mm.
person that writes better at night? Okay, well then adjust your life so you can do that, you know, like,
Yeah.
um, all that kind of stuff. So, and then knowing what you want to do is crucial too, just in terms of like, I think people, when you say like, what do you want to be? If the answer is, I want to be a TV writer, like that's not a good answer. A better answer is, I want to be a 1 hour drama writer. I want to be a comedy writer. I want to write hard hitting cable stuff about introspective, you know, like you need to be more specific because that'll help you to know, um, you know, like what you're focusing on, how you're writing, how you're working, whose stuff you're studying. Um, and so you sort of know your brand too. Like, cause I think when you start to write, like, what kind of writer do you want to be? And then lean into that, you know, like who are you? What do you know? So for example, like the pilot that broke me, the pilot that like really got me attention and got me an agent and got me hired at elementary was like, it was called Firecrackers. And it's about a pair of brothers who moonlight as arsonists for hire, in Detroit. It combines everything that's about me, you know, like the relationship. I have a brother. My relationship with him is great, you know, like, but it's fun and it's up and down and it's, you know, and so like that, the central relationship, that pilot is about brothers. Detroit is a really fascinating study of like urban decay, and it leans
Hmm.
into like you know, again, cartography, geography, cultural geography, like what has happened to Detroit in the last 50 years is fascinating. So what did I do? I read 60 textbooks about Detroit and like, you know, immerse myself in Detroit. And then that's a whole element of the pilot. So it's like knowing who you are, what you can do, and then leaning into that stuff, I think is the best. This is the last thing I'll say is like, you know, it's a thing you hear in sports is like no days off, you know, like, anything that you do it, like do it to completion, work your ass off doing it. So like what I mean by that is this, like when I was in this assistant at Grey's Anatomy, I was an intern. I was a lowly intern. And Krista Vernoff, who's a, you know, a giant important writer, at one point was just like, "Hey, can you make me a cup of tea?" You're like most people are just like, "Ugh, I'm a writer. I don't want to make tea. This is bullshit." Like, and I was just like, you got it, absolutely. Like, I'm going to make you the best fucking cup of tea you've ever had in your life." You know, like, and I worked hard to figure out what kind of tea does she like. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but like, she noticed. Like a month later, she was like, "This tea is great. Who are you again? What's your name?" You know, like, "Oh, my name's Jeff." "Great. Can you do this for me?" You know, then all of a sudden she handed me more tasks and more tasks. And she noticed the printer was never empty. And I was always there before her and I always stayed late. And then, you know, what that earned me was, well, this is a true story. Like it was late one night on a Friday. She was there late. Shonda Rhimes walked in and gave her some pages to rewrite on private practice. And she was frustrated. And she had to be there late. Everyone else had left. And I just said to myself, like, I'm not leaving till she leaves. Like, I'm an intern. I'm going to be here till 1 a.m. if I have to be. This is Krista. Like, if she needs tea, I'm going to make it for her.
Hmm.
And so at like midnight, I'm sitting at her desk. All my friends are out partying. I'm there on a Friday night. Krista called me and she said, "Hey, Jeff, come here." Walked into her office and she said, like, "You feel like doing some writing?" And I was like, "Yes, ma'am, whatever you need." She was like, "Great, take the scene that Shonda gave me and look at it." I was like, "Okay." Um, and I did that and I gave it to her and she called me in and said, like, "This is great, man. Who are you again? Where did you come from?" And all of a sudden, she then became a champion for me, you know, like, and it all
Mm.
started because I made her tea well, you know, like,
Wow.
and then when I was up for the job at elementary, she called Rob Doherty, the showrunner. She like wrote to him and said, "You'd be a fool not to hire this guy." And
Mm.
that's a huge email. It's a huge vote from somebody. She's a big time running Grey's Anatomy. You know, to have that person
Yeah.
emailing my potential boss and saying, "Hire this guy." And like I said, it all came from making tea. So you just have to like anything that if they want you to sweep the floor the best it's ever been swept in its life, you know, because people
Yeah.
notice that stuff and they'll notice that you're a hard worker and they'll want to take the time to get to know you and try and help you.
Wow.
It's a very long answer. Sorry.
That's a great story, but I'm wondering if you're finding challenges with work ethic in younger generations because I hear a lot of complaints of folks that run businesses, and this is outside of entertainment, but just in general, I think there's a value shift that's happening with younger generations. And I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing, but I think that younger generations are starting to question this concept of first one there, last one to leave, you know, sacrifice everything to make the best tea you can for the for this writer or whatever the context is. But are you seeing that? Are you observing that in younger generations?
I think like I would say yes and no. You know, I mean, I think the point, the question, the doubt they have about the sort of system and like this, this, hey, work for free for 3 years, that sort of stuff. That
Right.
is bullshit.
Yeah.
And I'm glad it's being questioned. And oh, by the way, the other thing that's great about these like the younger generation is like, yeah, they're also the generation who are like, hey, let's be nice to everybody and call people whatever pronouns they want. Like they
Right.
bring this enthusiasm of like, let's be kind, which is
Right.
also great. Because by the way, Hollywood needed that, as we all
Right.
know, from movements like Me Too. And like this
Uh-huh.
town, was a cesspool morally. And thank God for the younger generation being like, hey, stop treating people like that. I hope that continues. Yeah, look, the thing that's, I wouldn't say that they have a problem with working on it. It's just that I think younger people are coming from a place where like they have all these media has become democratized. They may have been spent 3 years making their own YouTube show by the time they show up to be the assistant at my TV show, for example,
Hmm.
or at elementary. So I think it's just a little bit of knowing like, okay, this is it's not that they lack work ethic. I think they just are used to working in a different way. They're used to being the kind of the rulers of their own kingdoms.
Hmm.
And now here comes a bunch of older people saying, no, do it this way. Hey, fill the printer. So I think it's not that they don't lack work ethic. I think it's more just that there's a shift in what that work looks like.
Right.
And it's about, can you embrace that or not? So that's less, like the ethic is there. It's just like, yeah, you know what? Sometimes like this is really an apprentice business, to be honest with you. Like I I'll speak candidly. I have a master's degree from one of the most elite screenwriting institutions in the world. And I showed up at elementary thinking I was the shit and learned in about 10 hours that I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. Like I had zero idea of how to write television. And I was coming out of one of the most elite schools in the world. And thank God that like I knew enough at least to like keep my mouth shut and just learn from people around me. So like I think that's the thing is people want to help you, like people want to give. We got, in my show this season, like we gave the writer's assistant her first ever script. I was thrilled to do that. She's a badass, and she worked her ass off doing all the bullshit that she had to do. She was at elementary as well. And she was so good about everything that was asked of her. She did well, and so it's like, that's a sort of rambling answer to your question. But like I said, I don't think it's a lack of ethic. It's just about knowing like, yeah, you know what, like sometimes if you want to do a thing that other people are in control of, you may have to kiss the ring a little bit to learn how they do it. And then they're going to want you to help them do it. Like it's
Right.
not like, hey, get my coffee and then get the fuck out of here. No, it's get my coffee and let me read your script. Like
Right.
Krista Burnoff ultimately read one of my scripts and gave me notes on it. And how invaluable is that? Oh my God, like notes from the woman who runs Grey's Anatomy. Good Lord. So it's just about, it's a give and take. It's a showing some respect for people who've, come before you, but not being so respectful that you're just getting trampled on, to your point.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, tell us about the charity work that you do in heart health and heart attack and stroke research. I saw something online about an event that's coming up in October.
Oh yeah. So my wife and I, as I mentioned, my father is the victim of what is basically a bunch of strokes when I was very young. It was a pretty pretty traumatic experience, as you might imagine. So I think it's about like, look, we, being in a place of having some success in Hollywood, and I'm grateful for that. And obviously, a lot of that is how hard I've worked, but a lot of it's luck, and I'm always aware of that. It's just about like trying to do my best to get back. So the heart and health thing is just like, I remember there was a writer at elementary named Jason Tracy, who's great. He works at CBS now and does, I think he's on the CSI thing, the reboot. But he's awesome. He's a guy that sort of is always kind of pushing people around him to say like, hey man, come on, like when you're in the position that we're in, we need to make sure we're sort of carrying more of the load, and that's that. And so he got me involved as sort of executives with a heart challenge and trying to raise a lot of money for heart and stroke research, which is the thing I'm doing now. And then I have a niece who has Down syndrome, so I'm involved in giving some, I'm hoping to trying to give a lot of money to Down syndrome work and Down syndrome charities. And ultimately, I think it's just about like, this job is a privilege, man. Yeah, it's hard to get, and yeah, you certainly have to earn it, but like, it's awesome. It's a fun job to have. You can get it. It's a privilege, and I think just trying to remember that and trying to make sure that you take the gifts that this job gives you, and use them to good effect, both financially, but also even just on the screen. Like, can we tell stories that are helpful and are interesting and are representative of people who may be struggling, or help people feel seen, things like that. Like that's also, I think, incumbent upon us. So it's sort of trying to be. I'm not trying to suggest that I'm being charitable by telling stories of people who don't look like me. I just mean trying to be a good citizen of the world, I think, is kind of important,
Yeah.
especially when you've been lucky enough to make it.
So can you tell folks, again, where they can check out Republic of Sarah and what the schedule is like for the episodes that have rolled out so far?
Yeah. So the Republic of Sarah airs every Monday night at 9, 8 Central on the CW. And then right away the next day on Tuesdays, it is available for free. I will say out loud, dear listener, it's for free because it's a
Nice.
terrestrial network. Um, it's on the CW.com and the CW app. You can watch it for free. And what's awesome for the show is that it airs every Monday with no breaks all the way through the summer. So there's a brand new episode every 7 days, like clockwork. We're not going
Awesome.
to get interrupted by, it's nice. We don't have any weird gaps or breaks or so check it out. It's a good one. It's a show that we're really proud of, and I think if you invest in it, you'll be rewarded. It really kind of blossoms over the course of the first season as it expands and sort of finds itself.
Well, based on the episodes I've seen so far, I agree wholeheartedly. It's a heartfelt show. It's fun. It's got a lot of humor and heart, and I recommend my listeners checking it out. So, social media, the only reference I could see for social media for you is on Instagram at Jeffrey Paul King TV. Is there any other place where people can find you online?
That is it. That's me. Everything else scares me. Instagram scares me too. But yeah, that's it. I will say there's a funny, just FYI, there's another Jeffrey King who sort of does my job. He's a delight. He's a guy that he's an executive producer on the Umbrella Academy for Netflix.
Oh,
And he and I get each other's email all the time. I think his Instagram is Jeffrey King TV. It's really funny. He and I have sort of this weird, funny relationship where, like I said, we get each other's phone calls often and each other's email because we both do kind of the same job. So I'm Jeffrey Paul King
yeah.
professionally because he's Jeffrey King professionally. But anyway, yeah, Jeffrey Paul King TV is the Instagram.
Well, Jeff, thanks for sharing your story with us. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me. What a pleasure, man. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, I have a favor to ask. Can you go to wherever you listen to podcasts and leave me a review? Your feedback is what keeps this podcast going. You can also check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook with the handle @DreamPathPod. And as always, go find your dream path.